Энэ бол iPhone 6s. Дэмжих өөрчлөгдөөгүй. Гэхдээ 3-ны даралтыг мэдэрнэ. Ингэснээр текстийн мэдээллийг уншихад өөр болсон. Имэйл уншихад, мэдээ уншихад байз. Чи мэдээ уншдаг гэж үү?
Яп.
Тэгэлгүй дээ. Камер нь 4К бичлэг хийж, селфи хийхэд эргэцэн гэрэлтүүлж өгнө. Энд ч нэгсэл лайк цуглуулна да.
Thanks.
Зургнууд нь бас өөрчлөгдөж амьд болсон. Та хүрээд үз. Тийм ээ, энэ бол өөрчлөгдсөн зүйлс.
Сайн байцгаана уу хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр орой манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн Калифорниа мужийн USBC компани гүйцэтгэх захирал ноён Маикл Гуревич оролцож байна. Good evening.
Good evening.
What brought you to Mongolia?
Well, I came to Mongolia as part of a foreign delegation that was invited here by the Ministry of Education, Science, and Culture. And we participated in the Science and Technology Park Symposium and heard what the Mongolian government officials had to say about it and had tried to give our opinion about the construction and development of this Science and Technology Park.
What you were expecting from the symposium and how much was it the difference between your expectations and what had happened?
I didn't really know what to expect, but what I really liked is the whole ambience and the real strive for having the Mongolian economy shift from the economy that's just exporting raw materials to the knowledge-based economy. And I think that there's a drive in the Mongolian community for that.
What kind of drives you particularly would highlight?
What I liked is the combination of the fact that the government officials, the community from the universities, the academia, the young students, the young startups also are looking for the change and they are asking good questions. They are looking to penetrate so-called global economy and the fact that it's happening, I think it's great.
You say that there is a penetrating happening. What kind of you particular could highlight?
Well, we ourselves work with several Mongolian companies that are currently in Silicon Valley. IT companies that are developing certain technologies for whether it's mobile applications or other kind of software, and they're looking to export it, sell it on the global market, start with Silicon Valley. And I think that they would have greatly benefited from the fact that they could have started here, save money. They could probably get the same kind of training and education from joint programs that we also offer. It's much more expensive just to fly over to California and really start off from scratch over there.
So what you're saying is many Mongolian companies who are boarded to or directed to that international global market with IT products, knowledge-based products, they can successfully start with the same speed or strength in Mongolia instead of Silicon Valley.
Absolutely, absolutely. Silicon Valley, I think there's this myth in the world that not just Mongolia, it's not specific to Mongolia. There are, because of the branding, I guess, a lot of companies just think that the minute they land in San Francisco International Airport, they can go to different venues and functions and they can successfully raise money and they can find those great venture capitalists and they can also offer their products to this companies such as Facebook and Google or Apple and they'll just buy it. It's great that they think this way, but also that's not the reality. The reality is much harsher. There are a lot of companies from all over the world. Silicon Valley is saturated with different companies and floating ideas. So my token of advice for a lot of foreign companies, and in this case specifically Mongolian companies, that they can really start here and draw on the resources that foreign partners can provide in Mongolia. And that starts with education. I've given several talks at the IT park here in Ulaanbaatar. And I was frankly really excited with the quality of companies that I've heard the pitches from. There were just last Saturday I was on the panel that was judging 4 pitches, and the quality was pretty high. Again, they don't really have a very deep understanding of how to validate the product. They're really at the stage of ideas, and actually there were several companies that have certain product, but they just have to position themselves properly. And we've had those talks and for just a long period of time, for probably about a year with different companies.
So startups like the ones you have seen, you're talking in our IT park, if they edit with more knowledge about the validity of the company, marketing, position, etc., they could do it. But to have this more, you said we need to have our education system, in particular probably the tertiary education system, to be in match with the similar ones that is providing people for the Silicon Valley quality.
I think that in general, the literacy rate in Mongolia is extremely high. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's close to 99%.
Yes.
There were a lot of young people who were educated abroad as well and who came back to Mongolia. Mongolians tend to speak a lot of foreign languages, English, Russian, other languages, Turkish. I was actually surprised to see a lot of people from Mongolia who graduated from a Turkish school in Ulaanbaatar and went to University of Istanbul or Ankara, and that sort of shows the fact that Mongolia is open to the world and can draw on this kind of resources to export products to this kind of countries. The job of education is to really give an opportunity for those people to utilize this kind of education. And also, besides just having so-called academia education, you really need to have the hands-on knowledge, which is really created through the partnership with, between the universities and the companies. And you really need to create so-called ecosystem where not just the universities participate, but universities, corporations, smaller companies, financial institutions.
How much this kind of system does work in the U.S.? You said corporation, the academy, universities, financial institutions or individuals combined together to, in a certain way, in financial language it's called venture capital, to invest in the new startups that make changes from the beginning.
Well, it's a little hard to compare U.S. System to Mongolian system for a number of different reasons. And the first reason is that this type of economy has had happening in the U.S. for several hundred years, and in Mongolia it's a evolving economy that really just changed from planned economy back 25 years ago. So it's not really fair to compare those. But what I really like is the fact that in Mongolia it's understood that there's a need for that, and it's moving towards that. There has to be an education for the financial institutions. My limited exposure to banks in Mongolia was, what I really understood from them is they don't really understand much about venture financing. They more accustomed to debt financing, maybe private equity, but there's really no understanding of venture financing, which really draws upon potentially looking at the legal system that would be more comforting to whether it's individual investors and as well as the institutional investors.
What's the principal difference between venture financing and debt financing?
Well, there are lots of differences. The debt financing is basically when you loan money to somebody and you expect to get it back, and venture is a risky equity
Not clear
acquisition.
terms. It could be long term. It may be never come back. The
It may
money.
never come back, absolutely.
It may come with
It may
a
come
lot
back with
returns.
Lots of returns. And the other interesting component that I've heard during the symposium is before I gave my speech, I did some research on Mongolian Stock Exchange, and there are just not that many companies listed. The daily trading volume is very low, and for the investors, you really need to build this ecosystem, starting from the so-called angel investors, who are just high net worth individuals. Really need to improve on the public finance, and investors are really looking to exit. And there are different ways to exit. For individuals, it's to sell their shares on the stock exchange, to resell their shares that belong to them in this particular company to a larger fund. So really have to look at the angels, the venture companies, and the stock exchange.
Two things. When you look for angel investors, the people should have incentives to invest into the venture capital. How does it regulated or motivated by financial system? Is it a tax issue? How to get a person with extra money to invest into venture capital?
Well, in a sense, all business people invest their money, and there's some risk involved. Obviously, to stimulate it, you have to look at the taxation. But taxation is not just one source of attraction. You really need to open up the market for different companies and really give a better chance to exit. And once there's one successful story, then there's another successful story. People will really believe in that.
So it is success-based motivation.
For a lot of venture capitalists, sure.
On one side. The second thing I want to raise was not only the input side, but also output side, or you said exit side. It's the essentials to have stock market working, stock exchange working properly, so that people have always see there they can sell their shares.
Correct.
Yes. So this is the conditions that still need to go ahead, along with education. Now, please tell us about some success stories you have been doing, because you have been funding several startups, organizations, companies, investment banks. What is something that you are very satisfied?
Well, I haven't had success story with companies such as Facebook or Google or Apple, but it could be a line ahead of us, right? We work with a number of companies from different types of technologies. Certain companies are working on the drones, the pilotless vehicles, different mobile applications, different S&P platforms. So they're working in the U.S. They are selling their products, both in the U.S. and foreign markets. We are fairly happy with them, and hopefully.
So you have companies who produces drones, or which part of this business?
Well, we've invested in companies that manufacture drones, and it's always work in progress.
Yes.
I mean, it's always the technology that needs to get evolved and improved, and there's lots of room for that. It's a pretty competitive market also. But our product is, we're selling it to different, whether it's government organizations or private sector, for different types of application.
Цаг хугацаа давтагдчихгүй. Харин түүнийг яаж зөвшөөрснөөр бидний амжилт бүтээл, аз жаргал биднийг давтдаг. Урлагийн хүний хувьд гэр бүл, уран бүтээлдээ зарцуулах цагаа зөв зохицуулах хэрэгтэй гэдэг. Бидний хэрэглээ улам ухаалаг болсоор байгаа нь та бүхэнд харагдчих байна. Харин энэ бүхэн надад үнэхээр их таалагдчих.
Ухаалаг орон сууц. King Tower Apartment.
How does the government sector use drones in the U.S.?
The government sector? Well, I mean, the government sector in the U.S. was probably the first one to really start using drones. I mean, if we go back to the first war in Iraq, there were Predator planes that were flying and bombing the adversaries' positions.
Yeah, the first one I remember, I mean, two persons can push it to this level of the man height, and it assembles plane type. But it's very weird, you know, small, such a small things, and they fly and they boom.
Well, that's why there are also a lot of regulations. The FAA has regulations. The certain states have regulations just to ensure that there are no drones flying and colliding with the aircraft around the airports.
Yep. Do they classify drones by capacity or by size, by height, or by altitude of flying, or how does it work, the regulation?
There are a lot of different regulations. I mean, the regulations are very thick, and it's probably better, addressed by the attorneys. But there are certain drones that are considered to be somewhat commercials and have commercial applications, and certain drones just as toys that can't fly over a certain altitude, or they cannot be in the air for an extended period of time, or their load capacity is fairly low, so they won't really be highly regulated. But the larger device you have, the more regulated it is.
Still, there is a general say they will regulate the altitude of their flying, isn't it?
Absolutely.
At which level they will?
There's certain corridor that they've given to the drones, and it also depends on the federal regulations as well as certain state regulations. Please don't hold me to the numbers, but I think the current regulation is that the drones can't fly over 400 feet and not below 250 feet. And again, I'm maybe a little off on the numbers, but it's pretty much a certain corridor.
Certain corridor, 400, let's say, feet means about 100 something meters.
Right.
And certain level, say in Hong Kong, the highest building in international commercial centers, we see 148 meters. So then this sort of regulation, right?
Correct.
Not too high or not too low. It's also a security concern as well, as we have talked recently.
Absolutely. The other concern for the authorities is security. Several months ago, as you probably heard, there was this incident when a drone was flying over the White House. And you obviously don't really want that. I mean, nothing fortunately happened, but who knows what kind of things could have been done.
See, now Mongolia, it's 3 million people, 1.5 million square kilometer land, very scarce.
Correct.
Yet we have a big pasture, and the family household may have thousands of animals dispersed all around the place. And it could be a good chance for them to use the drones to control where are they, etc. What do you think?
I think that Mongolia has great potential application for the drone technology, starting from the controlling the cattle over in the countryside, controlling pasture because the pasture needs to be improved. And it also drives the fact that the overall agriculture can be improved based on additional technology. So that's really need to look at the application of this innovative technology to the existing industries. I mean, the other application, as you can probably see here from the window, is the traffic gridlock.
Yes.
You know, drones can be used for that as well.
Yes.
The good thing that the Mongolian airspace is not heavily populated by the aircraft, which is really a concern in the U.S.
Yes.
And in Mongolia, you know, we can barely see the airplanes landing, and it's just one major airport.
Yeah, there is a Trans-Air Mongolia, and they're increasing the capacity 3 times from this year, but still you cannot compare with the U.S. traffic, the sake of density.
Well, I mean, the overall density of the airports is not there.
You know, Michael, we have been talking about maybe some ideas that my Mongolian country fellows may take into consideration. Is one, Mongolia can have knowledge economy based on particular specific products, like applications that those already in Silicon Valley, some Mongolian companies, and plus drones. And maybe if Mongolia several startups compete with better use of drone for a country like Mongolia with the agriculture, animal husbandry, there may be a good chance, then later on to sell it to other countries. What a chance for that?
Well, I think that there's obviously great opportunities for that. I'm sure that there are talented engineers and inventors who can actually work on this type of technology and expand on it. There could be certain M&A opportunities to maybe acquiring a company that already has a certain advantage and bring it to Mongolia and establish the R&D center that can further improve on that technology.
So, very interesting idea. Mongolian companies can buy or merge or acquire companies in the U.S. which has already this sort of knowledge, know-how, skills, bring them here with the people, then to go this sort of things. It will be faster, that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. That's been done in the world. Other countries have done it with the private money as well as the government money.
What would be a chance to be kind of competing with that worldwide?
I think there are always opportunities, and the more you look for them, the more chances you have to find. Of course, you really have to do the due diligence and not just to waste money acquiring any type of company. You know, ultimately, I think once the due diligence is conducted and when you really see the potential application, you just do the scouting and you find somebody you're looking for.
You have immigrated with your parents from Russia to America.
Correct.
Right. And what made them to immigrate?
Well, it's an interesting story. I think that back in the early 90s, as you know, there was this turbulence in the former USSR, and just wanted to get big opportunities. So they do have entrepreneurial mind, both my father and my mother. So that's probably where I got a little bit of entrepreneurial mind as well. So they came to the U.S. They started the company that was doing medical transportation. Then
what is that?
ambulances and vans for gurney services for wheelchair transport. Then they expanded into public transportation sector. They operated city buses. And that's where the technology also started to come in, you know, the scheduling software,
They're professionals in that field? Your parents?
No, my father is an engineer, but he was working always in transportation sector, and my mom also is an engineer and an administrator.
I see. Wow. And what is the family business now?
Well, my parents retired, but we've successfully sold the company back in 2007, right before the financial crisis.
How lucky.
I think that most of it was just a good timing. My parents retired. They enjoy their granddaughter as much as they can. Help us out with her.
Okay.
And we are also grateful for that. I've been always involved in different business opportunities with the family business as well as others.
Certainly you are. You have been creating a lot of companies, helping with your advisory business with many companies to do so. And what other interesting thing was for me that you are the president of Russian Chamber of Commerce in Russian American Chamber in Northern California. How many members are there and what are they doing?
Well, basically the purpose of creating that chamber was to facilitate the opportunities for the not just Russian Americans, but it is pretty much open for everybody to connect them with each other, to have a platform to communicate with each other, to have a platform for foreign companies to come in and also learn from the existing businessmen, to educate them on the opportunities and how to deal with the legal system, with the financial system. So that's what we do, and we have several hundred members.
Yeah, but not every Russian family immigrate to the U.S. have been successfully as your family, and many of them trying their best, of course. And services like yours probably is what they need. You have been also in the San Francisco Bay Area working, right? You have been working in San Francisco Bay Area.
Correct.
Yeah, and what does the USBC and Investments do today?
USBC is a company that helps foreign companies, advises foreign companies, as well as US-based companies on various issues, from the market entry strategy, business development, legal and financial framework, and basically we also run certain companies for them.
Okay, you had a good chance to have good education. Please tell us your education background.
Well, my education background is I graduated from high school in back in the Soviet Union. Came to the U.S., went to school in Rhode Island. It's called Bryant University. Had my business administration degree over there. I also graduated from the Pepperdine University MBA program. And then I've attended a number of different universities, always for executive education, because I always wanted to stay on top of emerging trends. So my last courses were at Stanford Executive Education School. Courses in business development, financial markets, and startup strategies.
What is the most important character trait that makes you doing all this? That schools are not easy to study. So what is that character you think you find the most important for doing that?
Well, I think for me what's important is to start and finish what I have in my mind. I really like to see the results of my labor come to fruition. And I'll really fight for that. And it's probably my tenacity.
Tenacity and good planning, vision.
Hopefully.
Thank you very much, Michael, for being with us. And what you and me have talked today may have a very good food for thoughts for Mongolian startups.
I hope so, and I hope that Mongolian startups succeed.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
За хүн төлөвчтэй өнөөдөр манай de facto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн USBC компани гүйцэтгэх захирал ноён Маикл Гуревич оролцлоо. Их баярлалаа.
Баярлалаа.
Энэ бол iPhone 6s. Дэмжих өөрчлөгдөөгүй. Гэхдээ хурууны даралтыг мэдэрнэ. Ингэснээр текстийн мэдээллийг уншихад өөр болсон. Имэйл уншихад, мэдээ уншихад байз чи мэдээ уншдаг гэж үү?
Yup.
Оо тэгэлгүй дээ. Камер нь 4K бичлэг хийж селфи хийхэд эргэцэн бэрэлдүүлж өгнө. Энд ч нэгсээ лайк цуглуулна да.
Thanks.
Зургнууд нь бас өөрчлөгдөж амьд болсон. Та хүрээд үз. Тийм ээ, энэ бол өөрчлөгдсөн зүйлс.